The night in Springfield, Ohio, was quiet, but online, the world was roaring. A 2-minute video showed a uniformed police officer yelling at a high school student, drenched in the middle of the rain. The student, meanwhile, replied in a calm but firm tone. In the video, her voice was clear. "I'm just asking to be treated fairly, sir." That simple sentence became a viral quote. Instagram, TikTok, and X, formerly Twitter, were flooded with comments. Some were angry, some were proud, and many defended Alina with hashtags like Alina Speaks Truth and Hold Cops Accountable. Meanwhile, in his small rental apartment on the edge of town, Officer Cole Donovan stared at his phone screen, his face pale. He never imagined the video would spread so fast. He'd just realized he had become a topic of national discussion. "Donovan, you see this?" The voice of his sergeant came through the phone. "Be at the precinct tomorrow morning. Chief Miller wants a direct explanation." The voice was firm and cold. No room for excuses. Donovan dropped his phone on the table. He looked at his face in the small bathroom mirror, letting out a heavy sigh. A sense of regret began to grow. But his old ego still whispered, "I was just doing my job. I did nothing wrong." Yet deep in his heart, he knew he had completely missed the mark this time. Meanwhile, at Alina's simple home in the Maplewood neighborhood, the atmosphere was just as tense. Alina's father, Mr. Roberto Ramirez, an elementary school teacher, watched the local news. An image of his daughter appeared on the screen with the narration, "High school student fights injustice," goes viral on social media. "Oh, God," he murmured, torn between pride and anxiety. Alina's mother looked at her daughter, who was sitting quietly in the living room chair. "Honey, are you okay?" Alina gave a small smile. "I'm fine, Mom. I just don't like being treated like that. I didn't mean to cause a scene." Her father nodded. "You were right, honey. But you have to be careful after this. Social media can help, but it can also be cruel." Alina understood what her father meant. She wasn't the type of girl who sought attention, but the injustice she felt that afternoon made it impossible to stay silent. She just wanted to show that even a student deserved to be respected. The next morning, the Springfield Police Department precinct was swarmed with reporters. Squad cars lined the street. Cameras were ready to record inside the briefing room. Officer Donovan sat in a chair in the middle, surrounded by his superiors. Chief Miller opened the meeting, his tone flat but piercing. "Donovan, your video is viral. This has already reached the commissioner's ears. Do you realize that what you did yesterday violated the code of conduct?" Donovan looked down. "Yes, sir. I'm aware. I lost my cool." "You did more than lose your cool. You embarrassed this department," the chief continued sharply. "And do you know who that girl is? She's not just any student. She's a national debate finalist, invited directly to Washington, D.C., to represent the state." The room went silent. Donovan stared at the floor. His eyes slowly welled up. He swallowed hard, regretting everything. But the regret came too late. A few days later, news of the incident hadn't died down. One national news outlet even ran the headline, "Accomplished Student Humiliated by Police. Commissioner Vows to Evaluate Officer." At school, Alina became the center of attention. Students, teachers, and even the principal greeted her with smiles and hugs. But behind it all, Alina felt awkward. She didn't want to be famous because of this incident. Ms. Bright, her homeroom teacher, patted Alina's shoulder. "You showed a courage that few people your age have. But remember, honey, courage must be followed by wisdom." Alina just nodded slowly. She knew public scrutiny could turn on a dime. That afternoon, as Alina prepared to leave school, a black sedan pulled up to the gate. A man in plain clothes got out and looked at her earnestly. "Ms. Alina Ramirez," he asked politely. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" "I'm from the police department. The chief would like to meet with you directly. There's something important he needs to discuss." Her friends started whispering. Alina looked at the man hesitantly but finally nodded. Okay, I'll come, but I want my father to know first. The man agreed, and a few minutes later, they left for the precinct. In the chief's office, the atmosphere was calm but tense. Alina sat in a guest chair. Officer Donovan stood at the side of the room, in full uniform, his head bowed. The chief began. Ms. Ramirez, thank you for coming. We have followed up on the reports and clarifications from all parties. We have also severely reprimanded our officer who acted unprofessionally. Alina looked at Donovan, who was still looking down. I don't want to punish anyone, sir. I just want to make sure no one else experiences what I did. Those words quieted the room. Officer Donovan finally spoke, his voice soft but sincere. I apologize, Ms. Ramirez. I was wrong. I let my emotions get the best of me, and I was unprofessional. I know an apology might not be enough, but I am truly sorry. Alina looked at him for a long moment. Then she said calmly, if you are truly sorry, please use this experience as a lesson. There are a lot of people out there who need police officers who protect them, not frighten them. The chief nodded in agreement. We will ensure that, young lady. Thank you for your courage. A few days later, the media ran news stories. Officer who berated honor student admits fault, receives stern warning. High school student gives valuable lesson in integrity. Public commentary shifted. Alina was praised not for being angry, but for remaining calm and speaking the truth. On the other hand, Officer Donovan truly changed. He began to be known as a polite and thoughtful officer. Many residents were surprised to see his much humbler attitude. He even started visiting schools to give talks on traffic safety, often accompanied by, who else, Alina herself. Several months later, Alina stood on a large stage in Washington, D.C., receiving a national award from the Secretary of Education. In her speech, she said one sentence that silenced the entire room. Courage isn't about fighting back with anger. It's about standing up for what's right, even when you're alone in the rain. Thunderous applause erupted. And in the audience, a man in a police uniform watched the stage with tears in his eyes. It was Officer Donovan. He smiled faintly, proud and ashamed at the same time, but also grateful that his mistake had given birth to a great lesson for so many. From that day on, the story of Alina and Donovan became a topic of discussion in many schools and police academies. The story of a student who dared to speak the truth and a police officer who learned from his mistake. And for many, it wasn't just a viral story, but a reflection of justice, courage, and change. 3 years had passed since the event that shook Springfield. The world had changed. The video that was once viral was now just a memory, but the story behind it left a long trail in the lives of two people, Alina Ramirez and Cole Donovan. Columbus, Ohio. A scorching afternoon. In a large hospital, a young doctor in a white coat walked quickly toward the ER. The name stitched on the coat read Dr. Alina Ramirez. She had just finished her residency and was now on staff at the state's top trauma center. But amid the hustle, she never forgot the roots of her journey, about the courage to fight injustice without losing respect. Doctor, new patient coming in. Motorcycle accident victim from Springfield, the charge nurse said quickly. Alina paused for a second. That name echoed in her head. Springfield. My hometown. Who's the victim? She asked. A police officer. And another man. The officer's injuries are severe. Alina took a deep breath and ran to the trauma bay. When the curtain was pulled back, her eyes froze. On the gurney, the body covered in wounds. It was a face she knew all too well. Officer Cole Donovan. Her heart felt like it stopped. All the old memories flashed by. The heavy rain, the harsh words, the apology, and the blue umbrella they had once shared. Now, the man lay helpless, his body covered in bandages. The nurse said, he was in an accident during patrol, doctor. He managed to save a small child before he was hit by a car. Alina swallowed, then composed herself. All right. Prep the ore. I'm taking this one. For 3 hours, Alina led the medical team with total focus. There was no room for emotion, only responsibility. But behind the mask and sterile gloves, there was a quiet prayer she kept repeating. God, give him a second chance, just like you gave me one. Several hours later, the surgery was over. Donovan was stable. A severe injury to his leg would mean a long recovery, but his life was not in danger. When he regained consciousness, his blurry eyes caught the shape of someone in a white coat standing by his bed. Alina, his voice was hoarse. Alina gave a small smile. Yes, officer. This time, it's my turn to help you. Donovan looked at the ceiling for a moment, then let out a weak laugh. It's a small world, isn't it? Saved by the person I once hurt. Alina sat in the chair near the bed. Maybe it's not a coincidence. Maybe this is God's way of showing that good deeds always come back around. Days turned into weeks. Donovan recovered in the hospital. Although he now walked with a noticeable limp, his spirit was never broken. Alina often came to check on him, not just as a doctor, but as an old friend who was now seeing the real fruits of change. One afternoon, as the sun slanted west, Donovan looked out the window and said, Alina, I used to think life was just about orders and discipline. But after everything that happened, I realized life is about responsibility. And heart. Alina looked at him, smiling gently. I also learned a lot from you, sir. About giving people a second chance. Donovan nodded slowly. And you really became a doctor. That's incredible. And you've become someone I respect, Alina replied. A quiet settled over the room, but it wasn't awkward. It was the peace that grows from wounds healed by time. Several months later, Donovan took an early retirement due to his leg. However, he didn't stop serving. He formed a small community group called the True North Initiative, which taught ethics and integrity to young cadets at the regional academy. Every week, he was invited to schools to give motivational talks. Sometimes, he brought a special guest, Alina, the young doctor who was now a regular speaker on honesty and empathy in public service. From two different worlds, medicine and law enforcement, they both delivered the same message: justice and humanity know no uniform. What matters is a sincere heart. One day, at a national conference on character education in Chicago, they appeared on the same stage. Thousands attended, including officials and students from across the country. Alina opened her speech with words that quieted the room. I once stood in the rain, demanding justice. Now I stand in the light, reminding us that true justice comes from a heart brave enough to forgive. When it was Donovan's turn to speak, he looked toward Alina and said, I used to be an example of what's wrong. But that young woman taught me something my uniform never could, to be a human being who feels shame when he's wrong and has the courage to fix it. The applause was thunderous. Several students stood to give them a standing ovation. To many in that room, they weren't just speakers. They were proof that courage and kindness could change everything. That night, after the event, Alina and Donovan sat on the edge of the hotel courtyard, looking up at the starry Chicago sky. Officer, do you remember when you tried to tow my scooter back then? Alina asked with a small laugh. Donovan laughed too. I remember it perfectly. If I could go back in time, I would have apologized right on the spot. Alina smiled. If time could be rewound, maybe I would have been more patient. But if none of it happened, maybe we wouldn't be here. You're right, Donovan replied, nodding. God certainly has a strange way of bringing two people together, but always for a good reason. They both fell silent, watching the stars slowly being covered by clouds. A light drizzle began to fall, as if closing the circle of a story that had also begun with rain. This time, there was no anger, no accusations. Just two human beings who had learned from life and found peace within it. Several years later, their story was adapted into a short film by communication students. Its title was simple, Lessons in the Rain. The film went viral, not for sensation, but for its deep meaning. Many viewers left comments. If only all problems in the world were solved like this, with courage and sincerity. Alina watched it quietly on her laptop in her office. At the end of the film, there was a shot of a blue umbrella folded on the seat of a scooter with a soft voiceover. Sometimes God sends the rain, not to make us wet, but to bring together two hearts that both needed to learn. Alina closed her laptop, smiling, and looked out the hospital window where the rain was truly falling. She knew that somewhere, Donovan might be looking at the same sky. Alina became known as a young doctor active in teaching at various schools and social organizations. Meanwhile, Donovan, though no longer in uniform, was still often called Officer Cole by the neighborhood kids. Two different paths in life, but with one shared goal: to protect human dignity with a clean heart. And so, that is the end of the story that went viral. A story that began with a misunderstanding, but ended with true change and friendship. A story that proves that in every wound, there is always a lesson. In every rain, there is always a light waiting to be found. Justice without empathy is just rules. But empathy without justice is weakness. When the two unite, that is where humanity grows. Several weeks after the incident, the atmosphere in Springfield began to calm down. The video about Alina and Officer Donovan slowly sank beneath new headlines. But for those two, the story wasn't over. Alina returned her focus to studying, preparing for her final exams and her trip to Washington, D.C., for scholarship interviews. But sometimes, whenever she passed the street where it happened, her heart still felt heavy. Not out of revenge, but from a disappointment that hadn't fully faded. She often wondered, why could the people who were supposed to protect be so arbitrary? But on the other hand, Alina also realized that anyone could change if they were willing to learn from their mistakes. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Officer Donovan was undergoing an internal evaluation. He still reported for duty every day, but without his usual authority. He was assigned to help with administrative work and community outreach events. At first, he felt it was a punishment. But slowly, something changed. One morning, he was asked to help with an outreach event at a high school. And unexpectedly, the school assigned was Springfield Central High School, where Alina attended. When he read the assignment, Donovan froze. "Do I really have to go?" he muttered. But finally, he sighed and told himself, if I want to change, I have to start from the place where I fell. The day of the event arrived. The school auditorium was filled with students, teachers, and several police officers who were giving a presentation on traffic safety. Alina, who was helping the student council, was shocked when she saw who stepped up to the podium: Officer Donovan. The room immediately fell silent. All eyes were on him. But this time, there was no arrogance on his face. His gaze was softer, his voice quieter. "Good morning, everyone," he began in a low voice. "I'm Officer Donovan. And I'm here today not just as a police officer, but as someone who made a big mistake right here in this community." Alina watched him with mixed feelings. Some students whispered to each other, but Donovan remained calm. "A few months ago, I lost control. I acted unprofessionally toward one of the students at this school. I humiliated someone I was supposed to protect. I am not proud of that, but I am here to make amends in the right way." The room was silent. Even the sound of the fans seemed loud. Donovan continued, his voice cracking slightly. "My mistake taught me the meaning of honesty, empathy, and responsibility. And that lesson came from a student named Alina." All eyes immediately turned to Alina. She looked down, not expecting her name to be mentioned in public. Donovan looked in her direction and said, "Thank you, Alina. Because of your courage, I learned how to be a better man." Alina slowly stood up. She looked at the officer and said softly, "If you've truly learned from your mistake, sir, then none of this was in vain." Applause thundered through the auditorium. A few teachers wiped away tears. That moment wasn't just an apology, it was the restoration of dignity for two people who had once faced off in a misunderstanding. After the event, Alina and Donovan sat together in the school's back garden. A light drizzle began to fall, reminding them of the day this all started. "I thought you'd never want to see me again," Donovan said quietly. Alina smiled faintly. "At first, I didn't. But if I stayed angry, I couldn't move forward. I don't want to live with resentment. Donovan looked at the ground. I am truly sorry, Alina. I always thought being a cop was just about power. But it turns out our biggest job is self-control. Alina nodded. Sometimes the strongest people aren't the ones who can give orders, but the ones who can control their anger. The rain grew heavier. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Donovan took an umbrella out of his bag and offered it to her. Can I drive you home? No tickets this time, he said with an embarrassed smile. Alina laughed softly. Okay, officer. But don't pull over the wrong person again. Several weeks later, the two met again. This time, at a community campaign event themed Cops and Kids. Donovan was a regular speaker, while Alina was invited as an outstanding student representative. On stage, they spoke about honesty and justice. Their story inspired many. The local paper wrote, "Once adversaries, now united for change." They were no longer enemies, but partners in spreading a moral message. A mistake isn't the end, as long as there is the will to fix it. One night after an event in the city, Donovan wrote in his journal, "I used to lose respect because of my anger. But a high school girl taught me the true meaning of courage. Not the courage to fight, but the courage to be honest." He closed the book with a smile. He now knew that true respect didn't come from a uniform or a rank, but from how you treat other human beings. Meanwhile, Alina received good news. She was accepted into the pre-med program at her dream university. As she packed her things to leave for college, she saw her old scooter helmet in the corner of her closet, the helmet that had been the start of all the trouble. She looked at it for a long time, then smiled faintly. Sometimes, the small things that hurt you bring the biggest lessons that heal you. She placed the helmet on her desk, not to be worn again, but to be remembered as a symbol of courage, honesty, and forgiveness. That night, as Alina sat on the porch with her father, the radio broadcast a short news item. Officer Donovan, the policeman who went viral, has now been entrusted to lead the traffic education program for schools throughout Ohio. Mr. Ramirez smiled. See, honey? Even someone who is wrong can change if given the chance. Alina smiled too. Yeah, Dad. Sometimes justice isn't about punishing, but about healing. The rain fell again that night, just like the day of the incident. But this time, there was no tension. Only peace. The Springfield sky reflected the city lights. And among the falling raindrops, Alina prayed in her heart, "I hope everyone who has ever been wrong can find a way to become better." And that prayer, somehow, seemed to be answered by the sound of a patrol siren passing slowly in the distance. Calm, without shouting.